I gotta be honest with you. Interviewing is one of the most stressful things we can do, and I don't know that we talk about it enough. This is going to be a little bit of a rant, but at the same time, I want to see how many people agree with me about a couple of things that I've come to realize over the last 2 years. One, my level of stress, if I'm going to give a speech, talk in public, do anything, is inversely proportional to the number of people I'm talking to. I've done massive keynote presentations, 20,000 people, couldn't have cared less. Walk out on stage, I'm aces, no problem. I once did a demo for an audience of one, and it was the most stressed I've ever been. Now, at the time, I was a presidential candidate, so that kind of added to it, and I was a bit younger. But if you think about what an interview is, it is a 4 to 6 hour performance of 1 hour improv sets for an audience of one, where your future livelihood is on the line. Like, that is a massively stressful situation. Wow. The other problem that I have with interviewing is just the process is broken. Let's talk about what I mean by that for a second. I have a resume, and I'm going to go send that to a company. Well, with all of the systems that are available, Indeed, Monster, whatever the boards are now, and the ability to submit a resume to an open job description, is the friction's been removed. So it is way too easy, which means the signal to noise ratio for any company looking to hire is out of control, right? Way too many resumes coming in. They don't have enough people to process all the resumes. It's almost impossible, right? So if you don't have an in with a company, like someone who submits your resume for you, it's almost impossible to get noticed. Why? Because the way that the HR managers and the rest of the companies have had to deal with this is, we can't process all of these resumes. There's too many. They're piling up. And so they go and they buy these applicant tracking systems for resume submission. And those systems basically take your resume and try to pair it with the job description as written. If you agree with any of this, I would ask you, share this, send it out to anybody that you know who's currently working, either looking for a job, they do interviews. I would love to know, am I alone in this? Am I thinking about this correctly? Am I just crazy because I do so many of these? Or do people in general agree that the interview process is broken? Broken. So this highlights two problems. One, how well has a job description been written, and how much kind of language, flowery language, knowledge-specific language is there? Two, how much wishing is there? Well, we'd like somebody with 30 years of experience on Go and who has a PhD but is willing to work for $8 an hour, right? There's a lot of wish fulfillment going on in these job descriptions, but also we've basically turned applying for a job into a reductive exercise of how good are you as the candidate at SEO with your resume to map it to the specific job description in that algorithm's interpretation of your resume in that ATS. One of my new missions now with Interview At, beyond helping people, right? My new mission goal is to help 100,000 people, job candidates, land their dream job. I want to solve this broken interview process. I'm going to solve it. And I would love to know how many of you agree with me. Think that the whole interview process, whether you're an interviewer or a candidate, think it's broken and needs fixing. Not asking you, do you have the solutions? If you do, please go ahead and put them in the comments, right? But just let me know. Just write broken if you think it's broken. It's too easy to apply for jobs, and the ATS systems are kicking out too many resumes because they don't map very well, because nobody's very good at SEO, it turns out, and therefore your resume is not even getting noticed. Okay, cool. But now, let's say you get the interview, and you're going in, and you've got this slate, and you're going to talk to 6 people. How much time do you think that each person who's interviewing you has actually spent preparing for that interview? Do you think they have a list of questions that they're willing to ask you? I myself, when I'm doing the interviews that I do here, I script them all out. And this is how I've done it for the last, 10, 15 years, because I realize that in taking notes, it's far easier for me to pre-script my interviews with general questions I want to ask, and I adjust as I go. It allows me to take notes. But most people, they're busy. They work. They got lots of things going on. So they haven't done the work. They show up, they've got your resume, they sit down, and they ask the dreaded terrible question, tell me about yourself, or why do you want to work here? These are terrible questions. They're not prepared. It's a dumb way to do talent evaluation. Why? Because it's basically a giant gotcha game. The interviewer basically is trying to ask you a question that, I got you. I asked you a question you couldn't answer. Does that make any sense? The problem that they're actually trying to solve is, can you do this job? Can you do the job, this role, at this level, at this company, and exceed expectations? Excel. That's the person we want to hire. How best can we optimize for that? Well, the interview as it's currently structured is broken, because Every interviewer comes into it, nobody's really organized, right? Unless you have a really well-run process. You have 4 to 6 people, no one's really clear on what questions they're supposed to ask. And so the conversation isn't really rich with content. It's silly. But let's take a different analog, which is your annual performance review. You spend, in theory, if you've done it right and your company does these right, you've spent a ton of time creating a document which basically says, I'm awesome, or I'm sort of good, please don't fire me. But you've spent a ton of time creating this document that you can now sit down with your manager and defend the work and have a good back and forth because you've submitted the document, they've read the document, you have a fruitful conversation because you're talking about the work. It's stuff that you're comfortable talking about because you spend a ton of time preparing it, and they can now interrogate it based on what they know about the broader business objectives and what they're trying to accomplish broadly and how you stack up against other people on the team. Your interview process should be the same. Why shouldn't we pre-prepare? Here's what I'm prepared to talk about in my interview. Present that to the person interviewing you. Some electronic form, some screen, whatever. They can now look at, here's the stuff. It's more than the resume. The resume is a reductive, canonical version of you. 2 pages. Okay, great. It's hard for me as the interviewer to know where to go with any of that. It's hard to know what's important. It's hard to know what question to ask versus let's pretend you've done a star format write-up of just 1 bullet from your resume. Well, if I'm sitting in the interview, I come in and I know that I have to focus on a specific area, I don't know, customer obsession or, delivers results. And there's a set of stories I can look at and go, all right, hey, let's talk about this time that you over-delivered on this thing that you were supposed to do. I'd like to have a conversation about that. First, just walk me through it. Well, now you as the candidate can walk through your situation, task, action, result. That's your star format. Great, you can present it, but you're talking about it in a way that's answering the questions that they're likely to ask. They can ask additional questions as they go, but it's not, did they have good questions? Did they have good follow-up questions? It's a back and forth conversation because you've done the work to prepare. You're comfortable telling your story, and they and you can now have a conversation of, can you do this job? Versus, I asked them a question about a time that they looked around a corner and delivered something that customers didn't know they wanted, and they didn't have a story. They can't work here ever. It's just silly how we're doing this.